Hello and welcome to Theology Unleashed. Oh, hang on, I'm getting a feedback. Where's that coming from? Okay, stop. Sorry. Hello and welcome to Theology Unleashed. I'm Arjuna, and this is the channel where Eastern theology meets Western skepticism. Today, I've got two academics who are going to be discussing philosophy of mind. I've got David Papineau and Michael Egnor. We're going to get right into it. So I'll just say something briefly about each of the guests, but there's more about them in the description. So Michael Egnor is a neurosurgeon who makes a case for dualism and argues that the brain can't produce consciousness. David Papineau is a philosopher who's considered by some to be one of the best defenders of naturalism. And he defends physicalism or something more nuanced in that view. Are you happy with that label?
Physicalism is fine today. Physicalism, physical and materialism. Let's use it.
So David and Michael, thanks for coming on the show. It's a great honor for me.
Thank you, Arjun. It's a pleasure to meet you, David.
So I was thinking we could
meet you, Michael.
I was thinking we start with Michael giving an argument for dualism or against consciousness producing the brain, and then from there we can go into some back and forth. Does that sound good?
Sure. Just as a little background about where I'm coming from, I was raised as a functional atheist, and I was educated as a scientific atheist. So I was an atheist for most of my life. I was a biochemistry major in college, and I had and still have tremendous confidence in science and fascination with science. And I had a conversion to Christianity, to Catholicism, when I was 45. And there are a lot of reasons for it. I had a Damascus Road experience, you might say, but also there were a lot of intellectual reasons as well. I had felt through much of my career that physics, biochemistry, biology, and particularly neuroscience just didn't make a lot of sense in a materialist paradigm. I kept seeing things about these specialties that didn't fit well into the materialist framework. And we go into that in much more detail. But in physics, I certainly felt that the singularity that characterized the Big Bang and that characterized black holes really wasn't something that we could understand from a materialist standpoint. In general relativity, conservation of matter and energy is violated, which takes us out of the materialist way of looking at things. Quantum mechanics is practically a contradiction, I think, to materialism. That is, quantum mechanics, I think, is best understood from an idealist perspective. And in fact, it's not clear that subatomic particles exist in any kind of material state. They are wave functions. They're not little hard balls that spin around. In biochemistry, I really did not think that one could understand biochemistry without formal and final causes. If one sticks to material and efficient causes, understanding things like the Krebs cycle and mitochondrial production of energy and all the amazing things that go on inside cells becomes almost impossible. In addition, I didn't think that the Darwinian viewpoint that life came about as a result of chance and necessity really made sense without formal and final causes. I thought that you had to go to a teleological system to understand how life evolved. And particularly neuroscience kind of broke me away from my materialist perspective. When I was a first-year medical student, I was absolutely fascinated by neuroscience and neuroanatomy. I had a program text called Sidman and Sidman, from which I learned neuroanatomy, and I was thrilled at the prospect of being able to understand my mind and the minds of people around me by learning about the neuroscience of the brain. And I learned a fair amount of neuroscience, but I found that I seemed to know less and less about the mind the more neuroscience I learned. I've been doing neurosurgery now for the better part of 40 years. I've done 7,000 brain operations, and I've become convinced that there's much more to the mind than the brain alone explains. There are three fundamental reasons, besides just the anecdotal experiences that I've had, that lead me to think that. Actually, four. One reason is that I think the neuroscience, when properly considered, really argues very strongly for a dualist understanding of the mind-brain relationship. Especially, it argues for, I think, a Thomistic dualism perspective. I think Aristotle got it pretty much right, and St. Thomas extended those ideas. But there are three fundamental philosophical reasons why I don't think that materialism can adequately explain mental states. The first is that human mental states are characterized in many instances by the capacity for reason, by the ability to make logical inferences, to make logical connections. And a difficulty that materialism faces is that while all of our logical reasoning entails logical connections between ideas, there are no logical connections between brain states. Brain states are connected by physical laws, not by laws of logic. And that at least the identity theory brand of materialism, I think, fails in this regard, because that is something about the mind, which is the ability to make logical connections, that is not present in the brain. The brain has no logic. The brain just has physics. The second reason why I think we can't explain the mind entirely on the basis of brain states is the existence of qualia, what David Chalmers says is the hard problem of consciousness. I can see no reason to infer that that any brain state would create first-person experience. Brain states are third-person ontologies. So I don't think qualia can be explained in a materialist perspective. And the third reason why I don't think mind states can be explained materialistically is the phenomenon of intentionality. And as obviously David knows, but as some viewers might not know, in the 19th century, Franz Brentano, as a philosopher, proposed that the hallmark of mental states is that they're always about something. They're always pointed at something. There's a goal to them. And physical things never have any intrinsic aboutness. They're simply collections of matter. So the salient characteristic of a mental state is that it's about something. It has meaning. And you might say the salient characteristic of a physical thing is that it's never about anything, never has any meaning. So the Venn diagrams of matter and mind, to me, really don't overlap much. There are some correlations. The neuroscience shows that those correlations are rather weak in some ways, and there's a fascinating dichotomy between the correlation between intellectual mind states and the brain, and the correlation between perceptual mind states and the brain. Intellectual mind states have very little correlation with the brain. Perceptual have a great deal of correlation. So the structure of what I see, both from a philosophical standpoint and a neuroscientific standpoint, and I can talk about the neuroscience in a lot more depth, but the structure that I see that I think best explains the relationship between mind states and brain states is that of Thomistic dualism, which is an extension of Aristotle's concept of hylomorphism, in which the soul, which comprises many of the powers of the mind, is the form of the body. And I think Thomistic dualism is a superb way to look at neuroscience, to look at the relationship between the mind and the brain. And it solves a lot of the problems posed by materialism, and it solves many of the problems posed by other kinds of dualism, for example, Cartesian dualism. So that's a synopsis.
Thank you very much. Shall I go ahead, Aldina?
Yeah, you go ahead and reply. So he spoke for 10 minutes or something, so maybe you could do something similar.
Well, I don't know if I've got that much to say. Let's see how it goes. So I, too, was an atheist, a scientific atheist, and I, too, have spent much of my life thinking about just the things that Michael has been thinking about, Michael has been talking about. I mean, I trained as a mathematician. I did some physics. I did a lot of mathematical statistics before I started in philosophy. And I didn't have any conversion experience. I regarded it as a very interesting question, how to understand many of the things I was talking about within the scientific materialist worldview. But in the course of thinking about these things, I didn't see any reason at all to give up the scientific worldview or to augment it. because I think that all the things that Michael is talking about can perfectly well be understood and accommodated within it. So let me just think about some of the things that Michael mentioned. So consciousness and the workings of the mind generally, well, contemporary philosophy of cognitive science regards this as the main challenge to understand how human beings as physical systems can display intelligence, consciousness, reasoning, and so on. And there's lots to be said about that. I'm not sure we have any definite argument that the Materialist project couldn't succeed. So we're going to have to look at some details. I mean, to be more specific, I mean, I've written a lot about intentionality and how to understand it within a materialist perspective. I've written a lot about consciousness and how to understand it within a materialist perspective. I've written a lot about teleology and purposes and how to understand that within a materialist perspective. I've appealed to Darwinian thinking a lot to explain these things. But all the things I'm talking about, I don't dismiss them. I don't eliminate them. I think that they're perfectly good theories that do explain them from a materialist point of view. So let me be a bit more specific, because Michael, I mean, apart from his biographical remarks, did gesture at some arguments, though we're going to have to go into more detail. Michael pointed to some things which he said he didn't think could be explained by materialism. But well, I don't know what he thinks about the things that I and other people have written about this. I'd say the central problem in materialist cognitive science over the last 50 years is explaining aboutness, explaining how it is that one thing can stand for another. How something going on inside my head can be about Lima, the capital of Peru, about the city on the other side of the world. And I have a lot of detailed things to say about that, what it is that makes it the case that the states of my brain or the words that I'm uttering have a semantic significance. And I don't see why just to point to this is an argument for dualism. Suppose I accepted that there was some extra stuff beyond the material stuff, some kind of ectoplasmic mind stuff. Why wouldn't the same problem just be there? How can this ectoplasmic mind stuff point to something on the other side of the world? How's this magic done? So it doesn't seem to me much of a theory to posit something mysterious and then say, because it's mysterious, it can account for something that's difficult to explain. I think we need serious theories. And I think when we have serious theories, we see that they're perfectly consistent with a materialist point of view. So that's the argument from intentionality. And I think the argument from reasoning is pretty much part of the same thing. Michael said, well, look, there's logical connections between thoughts I have. And when I reason in a way that involves a sequence of thoughts having logical connections with each other. I agree. And that's possible because my thoughts, which I think of as material states of the brain, have semantic significance. They're about things. They're about Lima being the capital of Peru, and say about Peru being in South America, and therefore Lima is in South America. I mean, I can have a sequence of thoughts that have that semantic content, and if they have that semantic content, then there's logical connections between them. And if I reason in that way, I'm reasoning logically. And if I go Lima is the capital of Peru, and Peru is in South America, so Lima is North America, then I'm not reasoning logically. And I don't see any difficulty for a materialist explaining that. So I'm kind of curious about why Michael thinks just pointing to these things amounts to an argument. I feel the same about consciousness. I mean, I don't see any argument, we haven't had one yet, that the qualia, the what it's likeness, the feelings I have, are anything different from my brain undergoing certain processes. That's what it's like for me when I'm a being with a certain kind of physical brain. I'm a being who's got a visual cortex, V4, I've got certain kind of oscillations in V4. What's it like to be a being like that? Well, it's like being a being who's looking at Michael Schertze and having the experience of doing something there. I don't see any argument to think that what's involved in my seeing something red is anything more than my having certain oscillations in V4. There are arguments in this vicinity, but I haven't seen them yet. And from my point of view, I don't see any reason to the argument goes the dualist way. Having said all that, what I'm curious about is how it goes on the other side, because it seems to me there's a very strong argument in favor of being a materialist and against being a dualist. And that's the argument that has persuaded most modern scientists and philosophers to be materialists, when if you ask me, very few of them were materialists 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Why has this change happened? And I don't think it's just a matter of fashion. I think it's because the scientific evidence has come in and shown us that there can't be anything more to our mental life, our reasoning life, and so on, but physical processes. And the argument is this, that science has shown us that the physical realm is causally closed, which is to say, all physical effects are fully explained insofar as they are explainable at all, they are just random, by prior physical states. And that includes the movement of our bodies, the movement of my lips at the moment. So think about it from a neuroscientific physiological point of view. Hear my lips moving and ask the physiologist, why are my lips moving? Well, because electrochemical messages are coming down the nerves from my motor cortex to my lips. And why is that happening? Because various other electrochemical activities were going on in the brain beforehand. And from the modern scientific point of view, it's taken as given on good evidence that all physical effects have physical causes. Now, if you think that, it looks like if you're a dualist, you're convinced to view the extra conscious stuff as just epiphenomenal. In H. Huxley's image, it's like the train's going along, that's the brain, all these physical processes, and whoop, whoop, it sends off some whistles, all very nice, but it doesn't make any difference to what happens to the train. And I don't see how somebody who embraces the dualist point of view that Michael wants to embrace can avoid epiphenomenalism. You end up with the consciousness being an inefficacious dangler. It's something which maybe can sit there and observe what's going on in the physical realm, but never makes any difference to the physical realm. And that seems to me a ridiculous point of view. The view that my emotions, feelings, thoughts, and so on don't make any difference to what I do. Well, if Michael wants to defend that, we can discuss it, but it seems to me an extremely absurd and unattractive position. And so I don't see how a serious scientific person can avoid being a materialist. Now, having said that, the causal closure of the physical is not any kind of obvious a priori thesis. I've written a lot about the history of attitudes to this thesis, and I think if you look at history, it's something that the modern scientific tradition has changed its mind on a number of times in the last 300 years, and it's only in the last 100 years or so, even less, that the scientific community has become convinced of the causal closure of the physical. Go back 150 years ago, and not all, but I would say probably a significant majority of scientists, including neuroscientists, biochemists, and so on, believed in nervous forces. They believed in vital forces. They believed in forces beyond the standard physical forces, and they thought that they made a difference to movements of matter. Nowadays, no serious scientists believe in forces like that. which means that they all believe that physical effects have physical causes, and that doesn't leave any room for a dualist mind to make any difference in the physical world. So that's why I think we have to accept that mental processes, including conscious processes, are one and the same as physical processes. Otherwise, they're condemned to being epiphenomena. So, okay, Michael, that's an argument against your dualist point of view. So I'm curious about how you would answer it.
Sure. Well, I'm not an epiphenomenalist. I think epiphenomenalism is an incorrect way of looking at things. I take issue with your assertion, David, that a materialist worldview is a scientific worldview. I think the opposite is the truth. That in a scientific worldview,
that's just rhetoric. I mean,
okay.
Sure.
All right. So
I view what you like. I want to know what's wrong with it.
What's wrong with it? Well, a couple of things. The argument of causal closure refers to the interaction of physical things, but there are many ways of understanding causation that don't involve material and efficient causes, for example, formal and final causes. If causal closure is an inviolable principle of natural science, what was the cause of the Big Bang? What caused the Big Bang?
This is a messy technical question. I think that's a
no, it's not. No, it's a very simple question. It's a simple question because because there's a simple answer. We don't know. We don't know what caused it.
I don't
so
think
it's very simple.
I don't think
what causes the singularities at the core of black holes?
I don't think it's a coherent question. It's like asking what causes the number 5. I mean, you're misapplying the notion of cause to the beginning of the
So you don't think the Big Bang was a cause?
No, I think it was a cause of what came later once time started.
You don't think black holes? Do you think black holes cause things? In what way are they closed?
Let me think. Black holes do cause things. Yeah.
So where's the causal closure there? What causes the singularity? How do singularities cause black holes?
I'm not following. I said all physical effects have a physical cause, and
sure.
You're going to give me a counterexample of a physical effect that doesn't have a physical cause. So what would that be?
Black hole.
But by your
what a black hole does to the space around it is a physical effect. What's the cause of the black hole that leads to the change in the space around it? I'm saying that modern science is full of concepts that violate causal closure.
No, look, let's go slowly. If you think there are some physical effects, some physical events that don't have a cause, then they're not effects, and they won't be a counterexample to the claim that all physical effects have a physical cause. Now, putting it like that, it sounds tautologist, because I'm saying that the thesis is only about physical effects, and so until you have something that's a physical effect,
I didn't say that not all effects have a cause.
The point of the causal closure thesis is not to say that every effect has a cause. That's not the point. The point is that every physical effect has a physical cause, and not.
And I'm saying that a physical effect, for example, the creation of the universe.
No, I deny that's a physical effect.
That's a physical effect. It's the ultimate physical effect, and it has no physical cause that we know of.
Michael, I'm sorry. I don't regard that as a counterexample. An effect is something with a cause, right? So it's tautologist. It's tautologist that every effect has a cause. That's just a matter of definition, right? That's not the interest.
Right. Your claim, David, is that every.
Try and listen to what I'm saying.
I've been listening, Dave. I've been listening.
Try and listen to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every physical effect has a physical cause and not a mental cause or a vital force or a supernatural.
What was the physical cause of the Big Bang?
None.
Of the singularity.
None, because look, okay, the Big Bang doesn't have a cause, right? I say that's not a counterexample.
No, I'm not saying it. No, I think it has a cause. I very much think it has a cause.
I think it doesn't have a cause, but I don't take that to be a counterexample to my causal closure thesis. Now, do you follow what I'm saying there or not? Sorry, I follow what you're saying, but it strikes me as a case of special pleading. You've been arguing for this neat universe where every physical effect has a physical cause. And I've shown you that the entire universe itself, which is a physical effect, did not have a physical cause because the singularity of the Big Bang isn't a physical thing. Let's try once more. If you say it doesn't have a cause, I'll say it's not an effect, and therefore not a counterexample to my thesis.
We both agree every effect has a cause. I'm saying that there are physical effects that don't have physical causes.
I think you need to listen to what I'm saying, but let's try it differently. I think you're using effect synonymously with event, right? I am not claiming that every physical event has a physical cause, because I think the Big Bang doesn't have a cause. I think there's some physical events that don't have physical causes.
I don't agree with you. I think every event has a cause. Every event has a cause.
Sorry, I'm not talking about what you think. I'm talking about what I think and trying to show you that it's consistent despite what you're saying.
But how then can you do science? If you say that there are events out there that are uncaused, then every scientific theory has to include the possibility that what happens has no cause at all.
I think we're getting sidetracked here. Let's look at the more interesting issue.
Sure.
Take the case of the physical events of my lips moving, right? Mm-hmm. And take the thesis I put to you that insofar as that has an explanation in the physical processes in my brain. Now, I take it that you want to say, no, there's something extra to the physical processes in my brain that will account for the way my lips are moving. I take that to be your view, right? And therefore, I put to you.
Absolutely.
So you think that at some point in my brain, the matter in my brain is moving in a way that's not explainable in terms of contemporary physics. Contemporary physics will talk about the four fundamental forces. They will regard all accelerations of matter as due to those four fundamental forces. Contemporary physics doesn't think there are any counterexamples, i.e. bits of matter moving in ways that aren't accountable for by the four fundamental forces. I take it that you think there's some cases of bits of matter moving around in my brain that can't be explainable in contemporary physical terms. That's what you think, is it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. May I ask this question?
David.
Listen to the question, because this gets right at the issue.
Okay.
All right. Would you? I mean, obviously, you would say that your arguments that you're making here are based on logic, and your arguments come, in your view, strictly from the physical events going on inside your brain. Correct?
Sure.
What scientific paradigm ascribes logic to your neurochemistry? Where's the logic in your neurochemistry? Where is modus ponens and modus tollens and the logic of identity? How do you get logic out of gray matter?
I'm having trouble following the logic of what you're saying, but let's just flag the point.
No, it's a very important point. It's a very important point.
No, Michael, please.
Very important point.
Michael, we're trying to argue logically here, and I feel you're not being entirely helpful in this respect. We were talking a moment ago about whether there were movements or bits of matter in the brain that would be a surprise to the people in the physics department. And I took it that you were saying, yes, you believe they were. So let's just flag that as something we might come back to.
Even physicists would say that. No, I don't know of any physicist that claims that all the problems of physics have been solved. They're still surprised by a lot of stuff. I mean, this is all.
Of course.
We understand that much of physics. That much.
Quite. But if your view were right, what you should be doing is going to tell your friends in the physics department, forget about all that cosmology, forget about all that high energy stuff at CERN. All you have to do is go and look inside people's skulls, and you will find counterexamples to the theses of contemporary physics. You're going to get a Nobel Prize just by looking.
No, I mean, I can tell you about the experiments that clearly show the counterexamples. Clearly.
Okay, right. We'll come back to that. But I don't know if you've read any stuff on by me or others about how to explain intentionality within a materialist perspective.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think they make any sense.
So you want me to explain?
Yeah, David, please explain some of how you think it works, and then.
Well, I think there are brain states, structured brain states, just like, I mean, not just like, but if you want to think for a moment, think about sentences, strings of marks on paper, and elements in those brain states refer to things in the world. They have a semantic value. And given that, as I gave you the example, I have a brain state that signifies that Lima is the capital of Peru. And I have another brain state that signifies that Peru is in South America. And those two brain states will cause me to have a third brain state, the brain state that signifies that Lima is in South America. And those are three brain states which have a semantics. Because of their semantics, they have logical relationships to each other. When I reason from the first two to the third, I'm making a kind of syntactic inference, a syntactic move. And that syntactic move, it respects the semantics of the states. And that's a perfectly standard account that you would get in any modern philosophy textbook in cognitive science.
Right, and it's logical theory. And it's wrong on several levels. The first way that it's wrong is that if you are asserting that brain states intrinsically have intentional content, you have the problem that brain states are exposed to innumerable different inputs. That is, when you, if you have a brain state if your brain state is thinking about Peru or something, you have all kinds of sensory information coming into your brain. You have vision, hearing, all that stuff. And in order to pick out what aspects of that brain state refer to Peru, your brain has to filter things. That filtration itself is an intentional process.
So you're pushing it, Michael. You're pushing an open door here. I've just written a book. My last book, published 2 months ago, is a passionate defense of the claim that semantic values of brain states are not due to their intrinsic nature. That would be an absurd view. They're due to the way that the brain states relate us to features of our environment. So they're highly related. I take it that you.
So it's a functionalism, essentially. So your materialism is functionalist, essentially.
I'm not sure I know what you mean by functionalist, but in the terms I understand, no, it's not.
But you said that your viewpoint is that brain states relate to mental states in their causal relationship to things, in their functional.
Brain states are mental states, on my view, but they do have semantic values. Elements of the brain states refer to certain features in the world. In virtue of that, the brain states have truth conditions. They answer for accuracy to features of the world. But what they refer to and what the truth conditions of composite brain states are is not a matter of the intrinsic nature of the brain states any more than the fact the word red refers to the color of your shirt is a matter of the intrinsic shape of the letters R-E-D. It's because of the way the words and somewhat similarly the brain states are embedded in a wider environment that they refer. I take it on your view, there's some extra material magic mind stuff, and it has an intrinsic property that enables it to refer to Lima, the capital of Peru. And I'd be curious about how you think that works. Why is it that there's some magic mindy stuff that somehow has this magic ability to point across the world? I mean, why does it point to Lima, the capital of Peru, and not the first planet of Alpha Centauri? What makes your ectoplasmic mind stuff have the particular significance it does? So I'd be curious what you think about that.
Well, first of all, David, it strikes me as odd that a man who has your erudition would refer to a metaphysical perspective based on Aristotle, based on Plato, and based on Thomas Aquinas as gibberish about ectoplasmic mind stuff, meaning that the Thomistic perspective on how the mind works and on how nature works is far less magical. Is far less magical than the idea that the mind state somehow magically arises from a brain state without remainder. That is, that you're insulting a very very venerable way of understanding the world, and you don't seem to be engaging it. Do you want me to explain Thomistic dualism to you? I mean, is that what you're asking?
I wouldn't mind you explaining the Thomistic theory of intentionality, because, to be fair, I do. I mean, sorry. Let me withdraw the
David, do you not know it? Do you not know how St. Thomas explained intentionality?
No.
It's very straightforward.
Tell me.
In the Thomistic view, the soul is the form of the body. It is different from other forms in that it can contain forms, but not become the thing it contains. And Aristotle actually said the soul is in a way all things. So the way that intentionality works in Thomistic dualism is that the soul grasps the form of the object of your thought, and that form of the object of your thought is incorporated in the form that is the soul. So the soul can have forms of other things in it without becoming that thing. So intentionality, and in fact,
let me finish, David. The form of the city is part of my soul. I mean, I'm trying to get the view.
David, let me finish.
It does sound to me like just explaining one mystery in terms of another. If you tell me that I have a soul and the form of the city Lima is part of my soul, and that's how I can refer to the city Lima, that just needs to be explained.
All right. David, Aristotle, and again, I can't believe that you don't know this.
No, I do have some ideas about
Aristotle. Please, Michael, please. David, I can't explain anything to you if you interrupt me all.
Yeah, I think we'll have to take turns talking. Sorry.
All right, Arjuna, can you? Arjuna, could you do the turn taking, please?
Yeah, sure. So, Michael Egnor, can you continue explaining your idea?
Sure. Aristotle believed that the fundamental things that exist in the world are substances, and that substances are composites of two things. They're composites of principles of intelligibility, that is, what you can understand about the thing, like a tree, and a principle of individuation, that is, that tree and not simply generic trees. These two things together were substances. The principle of intelligibility, Aristotle went on to call form, taking after Plato, who used a similar concept. And the principle of individuation, Aristotle went on to call matter. And form and matter make up everything that exists in the natural world. Aristotle believed that also that form was the actuality of something and matter was the potentiality of something. And Aristotle felt that the first actuality of a living thing was its form, which he called a soul. And he described three different kinds of souls. There are vegetative souls, which belong to plants, that enable plants to grow and to reproduce and to get nourishment. There are sensitive souls, which belong to animals, which allow animals to perceive, animals to move, do things like that, as well as the vegetative powers. And there are rational souls, which belong to people, which allow human beings to have rational understandings of things. Aristotle believed, and Thomas Aquinas affirmed, and I affirm, that the rational powers of the human soul are not material. They can't be material because matter doesn't have rational relationships. There is no logic in material relationships. There's physics in material relationships. And there's a ton of neuroscience that supports Aristotle and St. Thomas's view. I'd be happy to go over that with you in detail if you would like.
So I just want to quickly comment. I'm sure David is aware of this stuff, but I just think perhaps he's not given that so much attention because he sees flaws with it. So just wanted to point that out. So David, you please reply.
Yeah, so thank you. I did know about Aristotle, so that was a very useful lecture for the audience. And but I must say it. Well, no, it's a worked out theory, but from a contemporary perspective, it does look like mystery mongering. The idea that somehow these forms get embraced by my mind has no counterpart in anything familiar to modern science. Now, that wouldn't be a huge issue if you didn't face the what seems to be the central point that I flagged earlier. I mean, suppose that suppose for the sake of the argument, I buy that there's a form of the city Lima, and somehow this is embraced by my intellect, and that enables me to think about Lima, and so on. And now I put to you, well, there's nothing in the physical material world corresponding to any of that, but surely we want to allow that the things I think and feel and conclude and decide make a difference to what I do. They make a difference to the movement of my body, and I presume they're going to make a difference to the nerve signals coming down from my motor cortex. And I just don't see what possible story there is about how all that stuff about forms and souls is going to make any difference to the movements of the molecules in my brain. That's the problem that you face.
Could I give you an answer? I can give you a very clear example.
Oh, are you done, David, or have you got more?
I was just going to say that the position that you're putting forward, there was space for it within a modern science that allowed that, in addition to physical forces like electromagnetic forces and gravity operating on matter, there were also nervous forces, forces of sensibility, forces of irritability, vital forces. I mean, things like that maybe do have the structure that you were talking about based on Aristotelian principles. But the forces we're left with, I mean, modern science, modern biochemistry doesn't appeal to any of those things in explaining the operation of cells, operation of the rest of our bodies. So I just don't see where this kind of stuff you're talking about is going to be able to make a difference to anything that happens in my body.
Okay. May I answer?
Yeah, I think one question we need to ask is that any worldview is going to place mystery or inconceivability somewhere. So the question is the dualism placing the mystery in the wrong place, or is the physicalism placing the mystery in the wrong place, or which one is more justified and where it places the inconceivability? So you go, please, Michael.
If I could answer David's point.
It's a mystery that the mind can affect the body. Are you going to say it's a mystery?
No, I think the mystery is thinking that the mind can arise entirely from pure matter without any further explanation. To me, that's magic. I think Aristotle's view was a very well worked.
I don't think that.
No, please, David, listen. Let me talk.
Arise. It doesn't arise. It is. It is.
Listen.
The mind is the brain. It doesn't arise from the brain.
After he can have a minute or 2 minutes or so to talk, and then you can react.
Okay. First of all, Werner Heisenberg made a comment I thought was fascinating, because unlike so many scientists in modern times, he was philosophically quite literate. And he made the comment that quantum mechanics was an astonishing affirmation of the Aristotelian idea of potency and act, that the state of quantum decoherence was essentially a state of potency, and that observation brought it into act. And Heisenberg was a strong Aristotelian and said that after like 2,300 years, Aristotle has been shown to be correct about that. I can't believe that you don't think that science uses formal and final causes? You don't think that your biochemistry has anything to do with purposes? That your heart doesn't have a purpose, your brain doesn't have a purpose? And formal causes, I mean, yeah, but no, formal cause is the intelligibility of something. You don't think that physiology and biology has anything to do with the intelligibility of living things?
Yes, of course, I think
about intelligibility.
Of course, I think there's intelligibility.
Then why do you denigrate the Aristotelian concept of form?
Because I've spent my life. Can I have a go?
Yeah, let David's turn now.
Go ahead.
Because I've spent my life trying to see how intelligibility and purposes can fit into the modern scientific worldview. That's what I do. I don't start bringing in things that make no sense from a scientific point of view. I accept what science has given us good evidence to believe, and I explain purposes and intelligibility and logic and reasoning and intentionality within that framework. So,
David, what is the materialist framework? What is the materialist framework that makes quantum mechanics intelligible? How do you make quantum mechanics intelligible in a materialist framework?
So I'm slightly surprised what you said about Heisenberg, because I don't think he could have said that decoherence was an illustration of the Aristotelian principles, because I don't think decoherence was talked of until sometime after Heisenberg.
Well, no. He's talking about the presence of multiple potential quantum states that would collapse of the waveform become actual. I may use the word decoherence to describe what he said rather than to quote him verbatim. My question is, give me a cogent materialist explanation for quantum mechanics.
Well, as it happens,
I can give you a formal one. Can you give me a material one?
I don't know if we're going to be able to do the philosophy of quantum mechanics in the next.
We've got about 15 minutes to go.
So I am one of the philosophers of quantum mechanics who appeals to decoherence to understand quantum mechanical processes, and like others who appeal to decoherence, we do not believe in the collapse of the wave function. We think that's an apparent phenomenon. It's a superficial macroscopic phenomenon, and at the bottom level, there's no collapses. So
do you endorse the many worlds phenomenon? The many worlds theory?
I prefer the many worlds view, but what I was just saying was.
David, you've just let me make a comment, because this is fascinating. David, you have just gotten done ridiculing Aristotelian Thomistic metaphysics because it involves the concepts of intelligibility and form. But you have accepted the idea that with every quantum event, an entirely new universe is created. If you're talking magic, if you're talking crazy stuff, boy, that is the pinnacle. That is the pinnacle. You think a new universe is created with every quantum event?
Let's give David a chance to talk now.
I don't think you should argue in this way if you don't understand the theory. I do not think an entirely new universe is created every time there's a quantum event. I think there's a local branching. It doesn't involve the entire universe at all. It doesn't proceed any faster than the speed of light. It's a local thing. Nothing magical about it at all. I think you're working with a rather vulgar view of the Everettian understanding of quantum mechanics. But if we're going to start pouring scorn on other people's worldviews, I don't think we're going to know where to stop. So perhaps we'd better proceed in a different manner.
I think that's reasonable. I'd be happy to point out some of the neuroscientific evidence for the immateriality of the intellect and will, if you'd like to talk about that.
I'd be fascinated if there were such.
Sure. There are
We've
three
got about
lines.
4 minutes left to go, by the way.
Okay. There are three. All right, then I'll try to do it really fast. There are three metaphysical questions that I think can be answered in an inferential way by neuroscience about the mind-brain relationship. The first question is the mind metaphysically simple? That is, can it be divided into parts? The second question is, are there aspects of the mind that are immaterial? And the third question is free will real? The immaterial one is a good one to start with. Wilder Penfield, who was a pioneer in seizure neurosurgery in the mid-20th century, found that when he did awake craniotomies to treat seizure patients, these patients were fully awake during the surgery with local anesthesia, so they felt no pain, and I've done the same kind of surgery, that he could not evoke any abstract thought or intellectual content on stimulating the brain.
Michael, could you just pivot your camera? Your head's being split down the middle.
Okay. Fine. He could evoke movement. He could evoke sensations. He could evoke emotions. And he could evoke memories. He could not evoke abstract thought. He also noted that there are no seizures that evoke intellectual content. And I've seen the same thing. There are no forms of epilepsy where people have calculus seizures or have logic seizures or philosophy seizures. Seizures always evoke either perceptions, movements, emotions, or memories. And Penfield asks, why is there an entire class of mental content that is never evoked by seizures and can never be evoked by direct stimulation, and that is abstract thought? Now, there's much more to this, but that's the place to start.
So, David, you want to reply to that one?
Sorry, that's your evidence? That's your evidence for dualism?
It's one of them, yeah, sure.
Sorry, so Penfield put electrodes at specific places in the brain and stimulated them.
I do it too, and he's
okay.
Right.
That's great.
You can't evoke intellectual content. My question is, why not?
Well, because intellectual content isn't located at specific places in the brain. It's distributed all over the brain. What do you expect?
Seizures are distributed all over the brain. Why don't they evoke intellectual content? Why isn't there a single case report in medical history? David, why isn't there a single case report in medical history of a seizure that evokes intellectual content?
I'm no neuroscientist,
a single one, David.
Michael, just let me answer. I'm no neuroscientist, but I can think up the obvious explanation immediately, which is the intellectual thoughts involve complex structures in the brain, and epileptic seizures are incompatible with the presence of those organized complex structures. It's an obvious explanation.
But that's not true, David. That's not true at all.
Is not
no. There are seizures that evoke complex memories, complex emotions. There are seizures that will make you walk around. People have driven cars as a part of seizures. But there are mental states that are exceptionally simple. I can believe that 1 + 1 is 2. It's a very simple mental state. And never in human history has there been a report of a seizure that has done that.
I mean, look, if that's true, it sounds slightly surprising to me. If that's true, you've just demonstrated that thoughts like 1 + 1 = 2 are not simple mental states.
That's just hand waving, David. That's just hand waving.
Maybe if I summarize the argument, it might help. So I think Michael's arguing that the brain can produce all sorts of things via seizures, including complex actions such as driving a vehicle. And David's pushback is that intellectual content could be something complex. So, if there's random things going on in the brain, or, just triggering something here, or a seizure causing something all throughout the brain, it's not going to be specified complexity in a way which would evoke intellectual content. It would seem to me that if driving a car can be evoked, that's specified complex actions, which if that could happen, then perhaps
let me get you straight. Which are the things that you can do under seizure?
There are 4 things that seizures can evoke, generically speaking.
Some of them are pretty fancy and complicated. Just give me the most.
David, let me tell you them. They can evoke perceptions, which are fairly simple. They can evoke motor movement, which can be complex. Sometimes it's just this, but people can do, they're called complex partial seizures. They can evoke emotions, and they can evoke memories. And the memories can be very, very complex. You have a memory of your mother in the kitchen when you were eight years old. Seizures can evoke a lot of things, including complex things.
I get it. So it's just kind of contentful, intentional thoughts that you think are different.
All thoughts are intentional.
Sure. So that's what I meant. I mean, I was just putting the word in for.
No, what I'm saying is an abstract.
I also think that thoughts, intentional items, are very complex. And
David, why hasn't there ever been a seizure where the person uncontrollably thinks 1 + 1 = 2? Never been recorded in medical history.
Why has nobody ever sung My Way when they were having an epileptic seizure?
Right. People don't sing songs either. That's quite true. Right. What I'm saying is what Penfield said, and what I'm saying is that what Penfield said, and what I'm saying is that there's an entire class of mental states that cannot be evoked physically. That stands as an argument against materialism. Penfield started out as a materialist. He ended his career as a passionate dualist, as I have also, because I've seen the same evidence.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. If that's your reason for being a dualist, good luck. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm an intelligent person who is quite well known for changing their mind when they're given a good countering argument. But I'm afraid that doesn't make me feel I ought to be a dualist.
So we've got another 5 minutes. I'm not sure if that's time to start with another argument from neuroscience or not.
Well, I can do that. There's wonderful work done by Adrian Owen, who is a cognitive psychologist at Cambridge in England, looking at persistent vegetative state. Persistent vegetative state is a state where the brain is so massively damaged that the assumption has been.
Sure. This is going to be more of the same. I'm still curious about what Michael thinks about the way that intelligent thought can influence the movements of my muscles. That's the bit I don't get.
Oh, it's formal. Intelligent thought is a formal cause, and a formal cause in nature can work. You're looking at causes in a billiard ball sort of way where things have to bump into one another. There are causes in nature that don't involve physical contact and the exchange of physical parameters. There are other kinds of causes.
So I agree.
The formal cause is one of them.
I agree that the experience would be difficult to do, but you do think that there are counterexamples to the beliefs of modern physicists inside the brain all the time, when people are reasoning and
everything
acting on the basis.
What physicists themselves do is a counterexample. That is, anytime a physicist uses rational, abstract, intellectual thought, he is doing something that is beyond his physics.
So yes. Don't you think
it's everywhere?
Why don't you go and tell the physicists in your physics department that they should be studying physical processes in the brain to learn more about how matter is controlled? I mean, don't you think?
No. It's just the opposite. That these are metaphysical and philosophical questions. That is, the brain does what the brain does. I think the physicist should spend a lot more time learning metaphysics and philosophy.
That's not the point I'm worried about. The point I'm worried about is that your theory has a prediction that runs counter to modern physics. And if that prediction was right,
my theory is completely consistent with modern physics.
Let's let David explain how it's inconsistent.
Yeah, with modern physics. So
you think the intelligent mind comes in the indeterministic gaps left by quantum mechanics? Is that your view?
There are no gaps. No. Intelligence is the formal cause of activities of the body. Just like the will is the final cause.
Let me put my point like this. If you gave a physicist the state of my brain at T1, they would in principle feel that they could predict what's going to happen at the next time T2, or maybe they can't predict it exactly. Quantum mechanics, they will say please let me just make the point. They will say there's a certain probability, for various physical outcomes. So they would think that from T1 to T2, it all follows from the principles of physics. But you think, no, there's something else explaining what goes on at T2. There are going to be things happening at T2 to bits of matter that are different from what the physicists predict. And if that's so,
yes.
If that's,
but you've heard of Bell's you've heard of John Bell's work with Bell's inequality. That there are no local hidden variables. A state is not determined. A quantum state is not determined by the state before the quantum change. Determinism is false. You do know that determinism in physics has been very conclusively shown to be not true.
I don't think you should be lecturing me about quantum mechanics.
You can pull the authority, but do you think determinism is true in quantum mechanics?
Yes, I do actually. I mean, so do all Everettians, so do all Bohmians, and among philosophically inclined physicists and philosophers, the supposed indeterminism of mechanics is very, very dubious. So
you think that that Elaine Aspect's work has been misinterpreted?
No. The non-locality is uncontentious, and the confirmation of Bell's inequality is uncontentious. But
right. That's what I'm saying.
But that's different from indeterminism. That doesn't mean. I mean, Everettians and Bohmians all agree with those results, but they're still determinists.
So I think we're not going to be able to have a whole quantum physics debate here. David, you can finish your point, but I understand you need to get going because you've got other commitments. Is that right?
I'm just watching the clock. But my point was just. I mean, my point is neutral on the issue that Michael's raising. Whether physics makes deterministic predictions or whether it makes probabilistic predictions, your view implies that their predictions are going to be mistaken. And if that's right, you should be going to tell your physics colleagues they'd go and get a Nobel Prize by looking in the brain and finding out what you think is going on there. And I don't understand.
Well, I think neuroscientists should be looking in the brain. If physicists have enough work on their own to do, I think neuroscientists should take what I believe is a pretty obvious fact that the intellect and will are immaterial. Should take it much more seriously. I think they would do much better neuroscience. And Penfield and Sperry and Libet and Sherrington and Eccles all felt the same way. The greatest neuroscientists of the 20th century.
Yeah, but people back 100 years ago, they believed in nervous forces. They believed in extra force fields.
Libet did not believe in that. Sherrington did not believe in that. No, Penfield didn't believe in it. None of these guys believe in that. You're going back to the 18th to 19th century. These are 20th century leading Nobel Prize laureate people.
I've looked at Sherrington. Sherrington is ambivalent on this issue. Libet is much later. It's a whole different thing.
Sherrington was a dualist, as is Libet, as are so many of the great neuroscientists.
Right. Okay. So if you think that neuroscientists would do well to be looking for evidence of dualism in the brain, I think you should go and try and persuade your neuroscientific colleagues of this. But I don't think
that's why I'm doing a podcast.
I'd be curious to see whether you get anybody coming over to your side. It seems to
I don't know that I would, because materialism seems to be sort of baked in the cake here, which is kind of unfortunate. I think it slows us down. I think it's a profound metaphysical error.
We should have talked more about the evidence that has moved people to be materialists when they were. It's not just some kind of act of faith commitment, nailing your colors to the cross of some faith. It's evidence coming from science that has made people materialists, and perhaps we should have talked about that more.
Well, perhaps we can. I'd be happy to revisit this. I don't know if
we can do a part two. I'd be honored to have you both on again.
Sure.
I do need to go now. I do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I want to respect everyone's time. So thanks for coming on for this discussion. Any closing points?
No, that was a lot of fun. It was very interesting. Thanks very much for having me on, Arjuna.
Okay, cool. If you enjoy this, yeah, you go, Michael. If you enjoy this sort of content, be sure to subscribe, the like button, and comment.
It was good content.
Yeah, any final point? Did you have something to say, Michael?
Oh, just that I would encourage listeners to really take a look particularly at Aristotle's metaphysics and Thomistic dualism. I think it's a wonderful framework in which to do science. Maybe we can do an interfaith discussion too, where we present a counter metaphysics too. I would love that. I would love that. Awesome. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. We'll close it out here. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks, David.